Welcome to the One Cool Thing demo. It's an exercise in sighting, using units, and measuring to make an image such as this one. We'll start with pencil, and then we'll end with marker and pen. There is the final drawing. Woohoo! I'll tell you a little bit about the materials. These are some of the tools we'll be drawing with. I guess an important thing is a pencil. This is just your old 2B pencil. You can use whatever you want. And when you have pencils, you need an eraser. This is an eraser I happen to have. If you have another one, that's very cool. I guess for placing your paper onto a rigid surface, you'll need some tape. Here I just got regular old masking tape. You can also use artist tape. You also need a pencil sharpener. Just a handheld pencil sharpener. Need a assortment of pens. So you have you could use any brand, but here is a very fine felt tip pen, and I guess it's called felt tip because you can see that tiny bit of fabric soaked in ink right there. That's your felt tip. So that's an extra small pen. So for your nitty-gritty details. Have more of a 0.3, but you can see that felt tip there. It's just slightly wider. Have a brush tip pen. These are really nice. So you get those really thin lines and then thicker lines. Just works like brushing ink. Then just a good old permanent marker. Maybe it's not exactly archival, but they work for the sake of a school assignment. And another handy thing you can use is an eraser brush or Draftsman mini duster. If you have a clean paintbrush that has softer bristles, that can also work. Even a makeup brush that you haven't used, just make sure it's fresh. And then if you have any eraser paper bits, you can just brush that off your drawing. Here's a paper pad I recommend. The pound, so you see 98 pound, that tells us about the thickness of the paper. So yeah, it's thick enough to take ink, watercolor, and it has a nice smooth surface. So it's just a nice paper to work with. Also 11x14 is a standard photo size. So if you really like one of your works enough to frame it, you can easily get a frame at a store. And just for a sense of scale, so here's a piece of copy paper. Here we go. But that's what we'll be using for all the assignments in this class. Alright. So yeah, I'll give you a tip on linting your tape. So this is just masking tape. It can tear your drawing up pretty quick. So what you do to prevent that, get your little masking tape. There we go. It's rolled in on itself. And then you just put it on your shirt, any article of clothing. So that gets it linty, and so it's not as doesn't have as much grip or stickiness that'll rip your drawing. So you can do that before putting it on your artwork. So whenever you make one of your drawings, don't draw directly inside your paper pad or your sketchbook. I'll show you how you can remove your pages without tearing them. I sped the video up here. What I'm doing is I'm just kind of creasing those tabs along that serrated edge, going front and back, and then carefully tearing that away from the paper before I even draw on it. So yeah, the next thing you do after you get your sheet of paper ready is you get your linted pieces of tape. So you just get that rolled up tape, press it onto your shirt, make it not as sticky, and you'll just put that in the corners. Alright, so here is the setup. So this is just a black easel that I got at Office Max. It's made out of aluminum. It's really light. It collapses. It's worked for me. If you have any other easels you prefer, you can grab those. But yeah, highly recommend working with an easel. You can stand while you're drawing. it just helps you be more alert, and then you also cancel out a lot of distortion you get working on a table. So I guess like if you're working on a flat surface, you see how the corners are all kind of like pinched in. But when you have an easel, it's like you're working on a wall and you see the entire sheet of your paper without any distortion. So it's a good way to work. So there's an easel. Yeah, I'm lucky enough I got this little like stand-up desk converter. But yeah, you can just get a table. You can get a box or something if you want to bring your one cool thing to eye level. And I'm using, like in this case, a science fair display board to just kind of block all the maps and clutter and everything out of the background, so I could just look at the object and not be distracted. You can also use a box, or if you have like fabric or something you just want to kind of drape over everything, you can use that as well. Another thing to take note of is the positioning of the easel in like relation to the object, and this will hold true for any like still life you set up. So I'm a left-handed person, so I have the easel to the left side of the one cool thing, which is a plastic dinosaur. So when I'm drawing, it just makes it easier for me to look at the object. I don't have to be looking over my shoulder or getting in any uncomfortable positions. So if you're a right-handed person, just make that adjustment. So yeah, for all you right-handed folks out there, just place your easel to the right side of whatever you're drawing. It'll just make life easier for you. So this is our 11 by 14 sheet of paper. It has a landscape orientation. Just gonna flip it over and paste it on. There's the easel. There's the dinosaur. You're ready to go. I got my pencil. I'm gonna start by drawing general shapes very lightly. And I'm going to try my best to look mostly at the dinosaur and not at my sheet of paper. So I'm just kind of responding to what I see. So there's my gesture drawing. There is the dinosaur. So something I paid attention to while drawing the dinosaur was not just the positive shapes, so what's kind of like physically taking up shape or a form, but also the negative shapes or the space around the dinosaur. So when I was making my drawing, I noticed that this shape right here kind of looked like a shark fin. So you can see that same shape right here, that kind of sharky fin shape. So instead of trying to get the tail, the thigh, the shin, I just looked at that shape right there. It's like, okay, does it look like a shark fin on my sheet of paper? That was easier to figure out than kind of getting all those forms together. I also changed the angle of the head and the neck. So before I was going to make it more of a slope, but I noticed with the toy it's more kind of up and down. Here we are at the toy again, so you can see how his neck is just up and down. It's not really on a slant. I'm looking at this angle too, where his back meets his neck. It's really helpful. So when you're using your own object, don't just look at the thing itself, but also look at all the spaces, the gaps that are around its edges, and that can really tell you a lot more about how to make an accurate drawing than trying to draw the object itself. Yeah, I'll show you this brush in action. So we got some of those little eraser bits over there. I'm just gonna brush it away. We got a clean surface to work on. I'm beginning to refine my gesture drawing. So you can use something called a unit. So here I use the top of the T-Rex's head, the bottom of his neck as a unit. And I compare that to different parts of his body to make this look like proportionate. So there's T-Rex's head to his neck. So there's his head to his neck. It's one unit. We're going to see how many of these units fit into his body. 1. So from shoulder to mid-belly is 1. From mid-belly to tail is 2. So 1, 2. Let's check our drawing. Alright. So we got from head to neck, it's 1 unit. Shoulder to mid-belly, there's 1 unit. Mid-belly to tail, there's 2 units. So it's just like the T-Rex, 1, 2. So something else you can use to make your gesture more accurate is an angle tool. So you could just use a pencil you're drawing with, or if you have like a ruler, you want to use your other hand, you can do that. So when you have your angle tool, what you do is you line up your pencil with the edge of your object. So I'm pretending this pencil's resting on this drawn T-Rex's back. So it's kind of like a mostly horizontal but slightly skewed kind of angle. So it's going down to the left. We could also do this with the leg. So you just break up. So we have these like curves, which can be complicated, but just break them up into diagonal lines. So we have this pretty, there's one diagonal line, there's another, makes sort of like, I guess like an acute, kind of a tight angle, right where the crook of his kind of knee is. And we got another line for his calf. Then it bows out again at his ankle, so just kind of segmenting. So it's kind of, almost kind of like connecting the dots, but you just don't have dots. Lining up the pencil with the T-Rex's back. So we sort of got that like flatter angle, but as we get lower, it's a little more steep. So you kind of see his like haunches or his backside. Sort of has kind of like a rounded look. Lining up the pencil to his thigh. Crook of his knee there, so you got that kind of tight little angle. And you could do that with every part of the T-Rex's body. So just look at your object, imagine your pencil lining up with each of those edges. Then you look at your drawing and you imagine your pencil lining up with those edges too. So yeah, I guess at this stage in the drawing, use that angle tool, so just kind of figured out the edges of my plastic T-Rex there. The next thing I'll do is I'll use kind of the relationships to just like place the T-Rex's feet, his hands, his snout. You just use your pencil as a straight edge. So what sort of line does the kind of the heel of the T-Rex's foot that's furthest away from me make with the toe of the foot that's closest to me? So what sort of connecting diagonal line do they make? Or does the upper jaw of the T-Rex, does that seem longer than the lower jaw? In that case, I have to erase and kind of bring his lower jaw back. Where does the T-Rex's finger and in relation to this kind of like Adam's apple on his neck? So just kind of think about like how, like if I drew the arm out here, I knew that wouldn't make any sense. So just kind of see how each of the parts relate to the whole. We're looking at the T-Rex. So what kind of angle does his upper jaw make with his lower jaw? So that one's kind of, so I misjudged, so his jaw's kind of jutting out slightly. Where does his heel line up with his toe? So that kind of shallow diagonal line. And then we got the kind of this Adam's apple that the T-Rex has, and then the fingers don't extend beyond that. They're just neatly contained. So that's another way you can just kind of figure out how to place different parts of your T-Rex, or, well, you might not have a T-Rex, but different parts of your bottle, plastic animal, coffee cup, whatever you have on hand. So yeah, here's the drawing of the T-Rex, refined a little bit. Found out where his feet are, where his hands are, where his jaw is. There is the T-Rex. It's got these little itty bitty details like his eyes and his nostrils. I actually went up close to the actual toy to figure out what was what, because from where I was standing it was a little hard to decipher like the nostril up there from all the like scales on his body. Same thing with his eye. He's relatively like dark. So what I did is I just went up close to the T-Rex, so kind of figured out what his eye looks like, where his nostrils are, this top plane of his nose. Knowing that helped me kind of figure out, oh, okay, what's going on with all this kind of bumpy action at the tip of his nose right here. So yeah, don't be afraid to get up close to whatever you're drawing to just kind of figure out what it looks like from the top. And that can inform your drawing. After looking back at the T-Rex again, I made some adjustments. Made his nose not as bumpy. I just went ahead and used the brush pen to add the first set of lines. I guess the brush pen, it by itself, it kind of lends to some line variety, so it gets thinner and then it's thicker here. But we're going to go back into the drawing and beef up some of those lines. So maybe I'll focus on kind of like the lower areas of the T-Rex, like it's almost like a drop shadow, make them seem darker. And if you do make any mistakes on your outline, so like here I made the tail look a little too thick, just make the line thicker and it can serve as a shadow, maybe a drop shadow. Just somehow respond to that mistake and incorporate it within your drawing. You don't have to go about redoing it. Here's the developed inked in line drawing of the T-Rex. The lines aren't as uniform anymore. They're swelling or getting thicker. They're tapering or getting thinner. Also elaborated on some of the contours or cross contours. So contours, those are like the lines that are coming inside the form. So like this line in the T-Rex's thigh is describing its volume. So it almost kind of looks a little spherical. It's got, you can see the meat in his leg. It's rounded. Maybe another cross contour, this kind of wrinkle describing his rib cage. This line right here describing the jaw line. So it's any sort of line that goes inside your form that shows that it's 3D, a cross contour. And I'm going to go back in here, but so I started drawing the drop shadow as well. So instead of just kind of randomly scribbling every which way, I just stuck to those horizontal lines. So it feels like it's kind of the drop shadows like falling on a level flat surface like a table. So it's more of like a structural mark. Eventually we don't want to see any of these white marks, these kind of dried out marker areas. For this drawing, we want it to be pitch black. So there's the T-Rex. You can see like some of the little kind of the muscle details in the toy. That's where I found those cross contours. There's his neck, there's his jawbone. I simplified some of these drop shadows with the light. We have all these different kind of shadows, but I just kind of focused on the darkest ones. And this is really whimsical how you could see his little kind of snarling silhouette there behind his back. So I chose to focus on that in my drawing. There's the drawing again. So I went back in, added another layer of marker to that drop shadow, so now it has that really rich, inky, kind of saturated surface. I'll go up close so you can see how I just kept those horizontal marks. And actually, I think I'm going to go back in, do some vertical marks to really build up that surface, and maybe get rid of some of these like jaggy edges as well. But then again, I'll go back a third time and just finish off with those horizontal marks to make it look as just clean and clean as possible. Also, I added some other details. So I noticed in the toy that his back and his sides are really kind of bumpy, whereas his belly's a little more flat. So to just kind of mark where that texture changes, I added this line, cross contour that goes around his belly, his tail. And also, yeah, I guess with these these cross contour lines, you could think of them as like seams on a teddy bear. So you have like your leg, and there might be a line there that kind of shows where the leg attaches to the body, but it also shows where there's like a shift of planes or kind of flat surfaces that wrap around a form. So I guess that this can also, it shows, okay, we have one plane, here's another plane, the underside of the tail. There's Mr. T-Rex. So we're looking at the toy, and I'm just going to show you where I noticed that. So we have this kind of pebbly texture on his side, and then this like flat texture in his belly. So that's why I drew that line there, to kind of show those two different textures. So you could do that for your own objects, to kind of just mark out an area with a line to show that there's a change. I guess before I get into like detail and finishing up the surface, I'm going to erase these pencil marks, because for me they're starting to get in the way. So before you erase, make sure your ink is really dry. At least let it sit for a minute, because sometimes if you erase while the ink's wet, it could smudge, and that's sad. But I guess even if your ink does smudge, just find a way to make it into a detail or a shadow that seems like it belongs. But yeah, just when you erase, it's pretty self-explanatory. I'm going to erase, and then you can use your makeup brush, your draftsman's brush, to get rid of all this noise right here. Alright, so we got all our eraser noise. Just make sure you clean up your paper, brush it away. I guess, maybe my eraser was dirty. I'm just going to go back in there again, erase some more, clean it up a bit, and I'll keep on working. So, I cleaned up the drop shadow, went in with another layer of the permanent marker. I also went back over some of the outlines, the contours, so just went over them with the permanent marker just to make the black of the T-Rex match the black of his the shadow he's casting. Get up close. So I first went in just with vertical lines one more time over the drop shadow. Cleaned up some of the edges, just went in with the outline, then I finished off that shape with some horizontal lines, so just really made it a cleaner surface. Some of these thicker lines, I first did them with the brush pen. It was a different sort of black, and then that kind of bluey black that a permanent marker has. So I just went back over these outlines, contours, with that permanent marker. Right, so I added texture to the contour drawing, the inked in drawing. I'm going up close. Here's the plastic T-Rex that I was looking at. So I guess you see in the drawing I didn't fill in every inch with a little circle. I left some open areas and allowed some of these kind of like darker spots to imply the entire texture of the T-Rex. It's kind of hard to tell in the video, but I guess there's so I have a window here. So a lot of light is coming in from the right. Even the paint job on the T-Rex, his belly is a lighter green than his back, which is more of a black. So I use the density of these sort of pebbly round marks. So they're real close together in the back, so it reads more like a darker value, a shadow, darker color. And these areas I left more open, so there's no density or less density. That's like a middle tone. So it reads as a lighter area, a middle tone, or an area that has just light. Even some of the contour lines, cross contour lines I mean. So like this this line coming in, the T-Rex's thigh, his thigh muscle right here, this line coming in at his rib. I added these little notches on the side. Oop, there we go. So that's implying that pebbly texture on his back. So definitely, put your lines to work. So when, a line is kind of further away, it's thin. As it gets closer and closer in quotations, it gets thicker. You can also change the shape of the line to imply a texture. So maybe, the lines around the T-Rex's belly, see how they're all straight, but the lines on his back have these kind of knobs on them. So, they can have a lot more functions than just kind of saying, okay, that's the background, this is our subject. So it could do more than just being an outline. Another thing to consider is the placement of your object. So here we have the four edges of our picture plane. My plastic T-Rex toy, he's taking up the majority of the picture plane, so he's not this like little tiny thing in the center or to the left or to the right. He's pretty much occupying the entire area. And also try to find an object that makes interesting negative shapes. So we have, like we were talking about, that kind of shark fin shape underneath his leg right here. He also has this kind of implied cross that he makes with directional forces. So we got from his tail to his snout. There's one diagonal line from his toe to his hip. That's another diagonal line. So we have like an X. So just those two implied diagonal lines activate the entire picture plane. And I guess, now it'd be a little late to make changes if he was too small or something, but as you're drawing, just make sure you have a big general shape. Yeah, going into textures again. So we have these sort of round kind of circles on his side, but as we move into the T-Rex's haunches, see how they get a little more oval-like or oblong? Same here with this thigh. So I guess that's a form of foreshortening. So as these kind of scales are kind of wrap around these curves that are moving away from us, they get kind of squashed and thinner, but as they move towards us, they're more just kind of circular. So you can even apply depth with your textures. For different textures too, so have more of kind of like a scratchy chicken foot texture, not that pebbly scale texture on the T-Rex's feet. Already talked about his belly. He has some of that kind of chicken feet texture going on in his hands. So whatever object you have, whether it's a toy, a mug, a planter, just look for those different textures, different values. and try to find ways to describe those just with black and white and varying densities of mark. But yeah, that's the one cool thing drawing.